This is James Randi, and you're listening to The Skeptic Zone.
Welcome to The Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 463 for the 3rd of September 2017. Richard Saunders here with you from a very interesting Sydney, Australia, where the weather's changing a little bit. But yesterday the city and the surrounding areas was covered in smoke from various burn-offs they're doing around the Sydney area, because they fear this summer coming up will be very bad for bushfire season. So yesterday the city was blanketed in smoke, bushfire smoke. But before we run off to fight bushfires, what's coming up on this week's show? A grain of salt with Eran Segev, the globe-trotting Eran Segev. Now, not too long ago, Eran Segev found himself with Cara Santa Maria. Now, many of you know Cara Santa Maria from her work on the Skeptics Guide to the Universe, where she's one of the rogues, of course, but she's also a TV personality, producer, and podcaster in her own right. Cara Santa Maria chats to Eran Segev about all sorts of things, including strange animals in Australia, coming up at the top of the show. Then it's Brew Ha Ha Science from Australia Science TV with Casey Harrigan, talking about the dangers of boxing and boxing gloves. Then I catch up with an old friend of mine and an old friend of the Skeptic Zone podcast, who used to be known as Dr. Paul Willis, now Professor Paul Willis. Paul Willis was the director of the Royal Institution, the people who bring you Brew Ha Ha, by the way, and A Week in Science before that. But now Paul has left there, and he's focusing on a new career with media engagement services. And Paul will be helping scientists get their science out to the public through multimedia or general presentation skills. So if you're a scientist anywhere in the world and you're interested in getting your message out to the public, then I think you'll be very interested in this interview with Professor Paul Willis. Then it's a very quick Raw Skeptic with Heidi Robertson, Raw Skeptic Report, in the last of her reports from the recent Star Stuff Astronomy Festival in Byron Bay. Heidi chats to Frank from Brisbane about Astro Anarchy. And if you're in the Brisbane area and you're into astronomy, I think you'll find this little interview very interesting. Then to round off the show, some updates and interesting news. Last week we brought you the story of the anti-vaccination GP who went to one of the screenings of the movie Vaxxed and outed himself in the Q&A. Well, there's an update to that story and what's happening to him, and also the story of the world's number one self-proclaimed anti-vaxxer, Kent Heckenlively, and the situation is he has been denied a visa to enter Australia, but we'll be covering that story at the end of the show. Now, before we begin, here's a note from a good friend of mine, Chris Higgins, who is organising Skeptic Camp in Manchester on October the 13th. Now, this is just before QED in Manchester. What is Skeptic Camp? I hear you cry. Skeptic Camp is a free conference that celebrates the incredible work done by grassroots skeptics and activists. Now, if you're going to QED or you're just in the area and you'd like to present a short talk, just go to skepticcamp.co.uk. I'll link this in the show notes, and register, and you'll be slotted into the schedule. And again, thanks to the generous support of QED organisers, Skeptic Camp Manchester will be free for everybody to attend, regardless of whether you're planning to attend QED or not. And in fact, if you'd just like to attend Skeptic Camp, there's no need to book a ticket. You're free to wander in and out of the event throughout the day. I think we'll be hearing more about Skeptic Camp in the next episode of the Skeptic Zone with Chris Higgins. But for now, that's the message. If you'd like to take part in Skeptic Camp, if you've got something to say, if you'd like to give a short presentation and you're going to be in Manchester for QED, then I can really recommend Skeptic Camp. Well, that's enough from me right now. I'm going to run downstairs, open the door, leave the studio, run downstairs, look in the fridge, see if there aren't a couple of veggie burgers waiting to be cooked with a little bit of that lovely hot sauce. And while I munch all those, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
Grain of salt, grain of salt, grain of salt.
Let's all take this with a grain of salt. Here's Eran Segev.
Grain of salt now, grain of salt, you gotta take it with a...
So, Cara, welcome to your own studio.
Isn't this fun?
In your own home. Yes. Welcome to the Skeptic Zone.
The tracks are going to be backward because I'm track 1 since I'm on my typical mic. Oh, it's going to be confusing for you to edit. I'm excited to be here in my own home here in America.
Well, thank you for giving me all this fancy recording equipment to record something for the Skeptic Zone. It's really wonderful.
This is so fun.
So, first of all, it was great to see you again. Last time we met was at QED in Manchester.
You're right.
Almost a year ago now.
No way. We haven't seen each other since Manchester.
Yeah.
We ate, I remember we went to a restaurant and had steak, and then I was very confused because the bread they call pudding. Is that right?
No, there was, basically all dessert in England is pudding.
See, that's really what was just the bread that was on the side of the plate? Was that also a type of pudding?
I don't remember.
It was just bread. I was like, I'm so confused. I always get confused by what they call things.
Yeah, well, we're going to confuse you some more. You're going to be in Sydney soon.
Okay, but what's confusing in Sydney?
I'm sure we'll find something to confuse you with.
I know breakfast is brekkie.
Yeah.
That's not confusing, though. It's pretty straightforward.
Biscuits are bickies.
Bickies? Oh, and see, biscuits is a whole thing here. Like, we don't have... You mean biscuits like British biscuits or like American biscuits?
They're like cookies.
Like cookies, British biscuits. In America, biscuits are like crumbly rolls. They're like breakfast rolls.
Yeah.
It's bread. And then cookies are cookies.
Yeah, no, they're cookies. Our biscuits are your cookies.
So do you have American-style biscuits?
Yeah.
What do you call it?
I think biscuits too. I'm not a big biscuit person. So
that's so confusing. Do you do biscuits and gravy? Is that a dish there?
I don't think so.
Oh, it's such a southern, disgusting, amazing thing. We had a donut, by the way. I'm telling people who are listening. We shared a donut earlier.
Yeah, we did.
Amazing.
I have to, though, just defend myself and say I only had one bite.
Yeah, he had one bite and I had 9 bites of the same donut. It's delicious.
Yeah. So anyway, it's lovely to see you again. You've just given me a tour of your wonderful house with a wonderful view here. It's really so... LA is just... really beautiful from here. Griffith Park also has an observatory there, and you like astronomy.
I do. Enough
to have an 8-inch telescope in your lounge room. And I wanted to ask you about that. How much do you actually get to see? I mean, LA is notorious for light pollution.
Yeah, so in Los Angeles, honestly, it's a planetary telescope. Like if I'm going to take it out back, I'm going to take it out back to show people generally Jupiter and Saturn. They look the best through it. You can see Saturn's rings, you can see some banding on Jupiter, and you can usually see the Galilean moon, so that's exciting. But it's also incredible to look at the moon through it, and I do have a nice binocular viewer, so you can put 2 lenses in, and it's just 3D and stunning and quite easy to take photos even through your iPhone, so that's always fun for people. But when we go camping in Joshua Tree or the Sierras by by Yosemite, oh my goodness, like on a clear night out there when it's quite dark, you can see through this telescope, as you probably know, globular clusters and galaxies and just a lot of those Messier, like deep sky objects. And
Absolutely.
It's just stunning.
And to anybody listening who doesn't know, I absolutely recommend looking for globular clusters.
It's the best.
It's amazing.
It's the best really thing to look at. Yeah,
absolutely astonishing.
Takes your breath away. The first time I saw a globular cluster was before I ever owned my telescope. A bunch of my friends and I put our money together to rent out the Mount Wilson 60-inch for the night. Like Mount Wilson is an observatory up by Caltech, and you can actually rent like a full night on the telescope, and it'll come with a telescope operator because, of course, they're not going to trust people to touch it, and an interpreter who will stand there and help you climb up on the ladder, look through, and oh my God. And this is the telescope, by the way, where like Hubble did his research. Like there's a locker downstairs with Hubble's name on it, and you're like, what the? It's amazing. And the first time I saw a globular cluster was through that telescope, and I was like audibly, it's stunning. It just takes your breath away.
Yeah, it is quite astonishing.
We actually just this past weekend, for just 3 days ago, as of this recording, for my friend's birthday, we drove an hour and a half up the 5 from where I live. There is a little place, it's just into a national park, and it's called, I think, Fraser Park. And it's just a place where a lot of amateur astronomers like to gather on this basketball court, or maybe it's a park. No, it's a parking lot. It's a big flat parking lot. I don't know. The town is quite dark. And there's just not a lot of people, headlights or anything boning your shots. And we were able to just lie on our backs out there and watch the Perseids meteor shower. And it was so much fun.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And Killer came and he slept next to us the whole time in our sleeping bags. It was really sweet.
That's fantastic. So continuing on this theme of astronomy, I'm now, as you know, on my second day of a grand tour of the world that is anchored on one end by the eclipse that's coming up on Monday, and then will end at the end of September with the European Skeptics Congress in Poland. And in between, I'm doing a lot of other traveling. Want to talk to you about the eclipse. So I'm going to St. Louis to be with a bunch of astronomy lovers with Pamela Gay and Fraser Kane. And you're going to Oregon.
I am. I'm going to Oregon. And I think I can safely say this now because it's going to happen in just a few days. It seems as though I've been hired to actually do some eclipse coverage in Redmond, which is about a 14-hour drive. So it's going to be an intense road trip. And I'm also going to get paid, which, hey, can't complain about that.
Getting paid to see the eclipse. Really, this would be my second eclipse. I saw one in Cairns a few years ago, and it quite literally takes your breath away. It's the kind of thing that I don't think anybody who's seen the eclipse ever fully forgets it. It's just such an emotional experience.
I'm so excited because, I mean, it's like I know cognitively what to expect, but I have no idea how it's going to affect me emotionally. And I have all my gear and I'm all prepared, and ready to go, but I can't wait until it's only 2 minutes, that's the totality here for this eclipse specifically. It's only two minutes in a lot of the places where they have totality, but I'm going to have to remind myself to breathe, I think, during those 2 minutes.
Yeah, you'll fade. 1 minute, 50 seconds in.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Cara's just fainted. Yeah. So you do a lot of work in media and communicating science, but there's also all kinds of activities that you do within the skeptical community. So obviously, first of all, you're on the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe.
Yes.
Which pretty much every single one of our listeners knows.
Really? Oh, good. I'm glad.
But you will also be in Australia in November for Skepticon 2017, the 33rd annual convention. What do you expect?
Oh gosh, I have no idea what to expect. I'm excited because, okay, I've been to Australia once, so I feel like it won't be brand new, but I've never been to Sydney, which is crazy. So I'm really excited to see the city. I remember when I was at QED last year, the last time we saw each other, and there was a warmth there that's very hard to compare to other skeptic conferences. And that's not to say that the American skeptic conferences aren't also very warm and inviting, but there was something very special at QED. And I don't know, I just have a feeling we're going to see the same thing in Australia. I think it's something about having a smaller country that's much more communal. The United States is just so freaking big. And Australia is large, but population-wise, it's much smaller.
Yeah, population-wise, we're a third of the UK.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy. And so I just think there's a warmth and a community that I'm really looking forward to. I can't wait to see who decides to come out to the show. I've got to figure out exactly what I'm going to offer to everybody coming to make sure that they get their money's worth. But I'm really excited to share in this experience with everyone.
Yeah, so first of all, we're obviously really looking forward to having you there. But I think you will find that the atmosphere is something that is really, really special. I think all our conferences have always had this very, regardless of how big they are, and sometimes they get, hundreds of people, especially the ones in Sydney, there's always a bit of a, the word escapes me at the moment. It's kind of a...
Intimate?
There's a bit of an intimate feel to it.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah, even though it's a large number of people. Of course, you've already seen in other skeptical conferences you've been to, there's no real separation between the speakers and the audience, and you just get to just mingle and chat and all that, and that is obviously really nice. Back in 2010, we had TAM Australia in Sydney, and we did it at the Masonic Centre. Okay, interesting. And yes, under the big G, the Masonic Centre. It's a perfect location for a skeptical conference. But one of the things that they had there was that there were 2 levels, and so it didn't matter where you were always about 7 meters away from at most 7 meters away from the stage. Nice. They're all really small and intimate. The venue this time is a really wonderful venue. It's not built in the same way, but it's still close enough, and I think you will have the same feel to it, in the sense that you always feel like you're part of everything. And
that's so good too, because I feel like I'm the kind of person, when I give talks, I don't give canned talks, and I don't just like read off of a PowerPoint. Not that a lot of people do, but some people give the same talk over and over. It becomes quite practiced and rehearsed. But for me, the talk is important, I guess, but I'm much more interested in the Q&A part. Like, I love the part where I just get to interact with everybody and basically have a conversation. So I usually will make my talks a little shorter to allow for more time for interaction, because I just love the idea of being able to see the faces of the people that are there and being able to hear what their questions and concerns are, and really addressing those. I think it can take the talk in a completely different direction. And I'm always really open to that. I don't know, it's just so fun to interact with people.
That'll be great.
Yeah, I much prefer a conversation than I am talking at you for a whole straight hour. It's like, really?
Yeah, well, I think people will still want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I'll give them some of that. Yeah.
I mean, you'll come a few days in advance, I presume, and we'll hang out a bit.
Oh, yeah.
We'll go see some animals, local animals.
Yes, please.
With the descriptive names like the red-bellied black snake.
Yes, very descriptive. I know exactly what I'm looking for. And the dangerous brown snake.
Yes.
We have many things here in the U.S. that want to kill you as well. Like, we have some pretty dangerous wildlife here, but you guys really, I think, have the reputation. It's because you have a lot of venomous animals, right? Like, we have dangerous big megafauna that will, grizzly bears and pumas and, things that want to eat your face.
You'll see them before they eat you.
Exactly. Well, yeah, some of them. Pumas you might not, because they stalk from the trees. But we don't have quite as many. We do have some venomous animals and poisonous animals, so not nearly as many as you. I think it's like us, then the Amazon, and then Australia has like the most.
Yeah, Australia is notorious for mostly for spiders and then snakes. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, like, for example, you have I believe it's either the first or second most poisonous spider in the world, the funnel web spider. The full name of the funnel web spider is Sydney funnel web spider.
Oh, there you go.
So that's where it lives.
Yeah, here we just have it's mostly brown widows now. Yeah. We had a lot of black widows, but they actually, same thing, the brown widows were quite invasive, and they sort of displaced a lot of the black widows. I don't know if we have many spiders that would actually kill, or, we've got obviously rattlesnakes and certain snakes that can be deadly if you're not careful and you don't get the anti-venom soon enough, but they're not just like everywhere like they are in... But not in Sydney, right?
No. In Sydney, it's a funnel web spiders. Okay, funnel web spiders. If you have a pool in Sydney, you will have seen funnel web spiders around your pool, because they like the damp, wet soil and all that. So, and they in around February, when the males go out looking for females, they will venture into homes. I think most Sydney-siders will have seen a funnel web spider at some point. The thing is, they're not very aggressive unless you really poke at them.
That's how widows are.
Nothing will happen to you.
Yeah.
And the reality is that even though they're so poisonous, not poisonous.
Venomous.
It's so venomous. Yeah. There hasn't been a death from funnel web spider in like 50 years.
Oh, that's good.
So there's anti-venom, but deaths are extremely rare.
It's the same thing with our puma population. I mean, it's a fascinating story. I recommend people read about the ghost cats of Los Angeles because we're a very urban area, and we have these beautiful large cats, pumas, cougars. What else are they called? Panthers. All the same species, just different euphemisms for it. And
mountain lions.
Mountain lions, yes, that's another one. And they stalk from the trees. They can be quite aggressive. But they don't want to eat people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's only in dire circumstances that would happen, or when people are doing stupid things and egging them on. Or actually, it's the opposite of egging them on. When you see a mountain lion in the wild, you're supposed to act quite big and act like, because they're ambush predators. So if you act like prey, they will think you're prey and they might run after you. So you've got to be like, I'm larger than you. But we have very few deaths. If you look at like historically, it's like just, less than you can count on your fingers in like the last 50 years or something like that. So it's the same kind of a thing. And we have brown widows all over. You probably walked right by 5 of them on the way into my house. I love them. I let them stay because they eat all the mosquitoes.
Yeah, well, we have the most common spider in Sydney is actually the huntsman. They're in every home, and they can get very large.
Nice.
But again, they don't do anything. They're not particularly venomous.
Yeah.
They eat the mosquitoes.
Yeah, it's so important. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm moving away from I have a giant mosquito bite on my cheek that I got just last night, and it's so itchy, and it makes me crazy because Los Angeles used to not really have that many mosquitoes. Growing up in Texas, I was eaten alive all the time. Climate change, man, we're just seeing them in places they never used to thrive. It's just going farther and farther north.
So what else are you working on now? Anything else that you can talk about?
Yeah, so I just wrapped on season 2 of Bill Nye Saves the World. So as soon as that goes up on Netflix, people will be able to watch my episodes of that, which is fun. It was great to be involved in it.
Is Phil Plait still involved with that?
Phil Plait was involved in the first season, but I don't think he was involved in season 2. And the first season, I was not a correspondent. I was just a guest on one panel, like it was actually about alternative medicine. So it was quite fun I was on a panel with this guy, oh my God, who was just the most incredulous person. Like he just believed in everything. It was hard to even have a conversation.
Not everything. Only the things that are not true.
Only the things that are, with the crystals, so much with the crystal. And I was like, oh, I don't even know. This is hard to deal with. It's TV. You have all these parameters, like squeeze everything in within a 5-minute panel. I was like, there's so much to say. I was just shaking my head the whole time. But this season, I actually had the opportunity to go out and do field pieces for them. So it was a lot of fun. I'm not allowed to talk about what they are, but once they go live, you'll be able to see me in that. So we just wrapped on that. I actually have our wrap party tomorrow night.
Something that you've mentioned several times, we talked about it over dinner, and you've also mentioned it in several interviews that you've done over the years, and that is that thought or dream of sometimes at some point writing a book.
Yeah, well, okay. So one thing is we wrote a book. The Skeptics Guide wrote a book, and we've publicly announced it. I'm allowed to talk about it. We've already submitted the main first draft, and we're just waiting on the publishers to go through the motions of all the rewrites and things. So at least with 4 other guys, I have done a bit of, granted, Steve did like 90% of the work.
I'm shocked.
He'd fight me on that. He would say it wasn't really 90%. Each of us wrote, the chapters that we were assigned and contributed. But Steve, he's such an overachiever. So he did a lot of the work. It's definitely, I'm assuming it's going to be by him with us. You know what I mean? It's like, Skeptics by Steve Novella with the 4 of us. Eventually, maybe I'll write a book, but God, it's not going to happen anytime soon. Also, don't tell my literary agent that. He'd be thrilled to hear me say that. But who knows? I also don't know. I have some ideas about what to write about, but I think for I've spoken with a lot of publishers who have asked me, do you want to write a book? Will you write a book? Can we work on a book together? And a lot of them really want that pseudo memoir. Like that's what they want for a lot of authors, is this book that's sort of about their life, but also about, whether it's psychom or whether it's atheism or whether it's, my experiences in psychology. And I just feel like, I'm 33. I'm not a baby, but I still feel like I'm too young to write a memoir. Like, come on, what the hell have I done? I just feel like I need to wait a little while until there's more to say.
Where do people find out more? I'm assuming that a significant proportion of the people listening already know who you are, but maybe if you could just tell us about a few of the outlets where people can find you and listen to you.
Oh, shameless plug. I'm really good at that.
Yeah,
so the thing is, people who are listening right now probably know me from the Skeptics Guide to the Universe, which is an incredible podcast, which has been around for 11, maybe going on 12 years, which has an insane listenership and is a machine. I also have my own podcast, which I've been doing longer than I've been with SGU. Not longer than SGU has been going, but much longer than I've been with SGU. And it's still quite a small podcast, and I would love for more people to listen to it. So if you are interested in a kind of a different approach, Talk Nerdy with Cara Santa Maria, that's what it's called, is a totally different podcast than SGU. It's long form, it's really conversational, and it's just one-on-one interviews with interesting people, mostly scientists, sometimes atheists, sometimes skeptics, but mostly people within the sciences. So one-on-one for an hour long. I drop them every Monday. So if you just subscribe on iTunes or, any of the different podcast apps that you use, it's called Talk Nerdy, easy to find. And then you can learn basically everything else by going to my website, carasantamaria.com. You can link out to my Twitter and my Facebook. Most everything is like at Cara Santa Maria. But like Instagram, I was late to the game, so there's underscores in my name. Somebody already had my name. Damn it. Yeah. And I think on Facebook I'm /ScienceCara, something like that. But I think I'm the only Cara Santa Maria that does anything remotely related to science, so I'm pretty easy to find.
That's very good. So, Cara, I believe actually you record your podcast, Talk Nerdy, from the Skeptic Zone's LA studios. Is that correct?
It's so weird. It's weird how like your studio is so adapted to my personal taste,
It's great, isn't it? Yeah, like, we do that with every person we interview.
How did you know? Like dinosaurs. Somehow you have the lightsaber that the SGU gave me for Christmas.
I even have a dog here that looks exactly like your dog.
So bizarre. Yeah, I mean, I feel really at home.
Cara, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Grain of salt now. Grain of salt, you gotta take it with a...
on maynard.com.au. Welcome to Bunga Bunga.
39 episodes, 39 events, 39 cataclysms.
With a show that challenges the government, the God, and your very self. On today's show, you'll hear... Angela here.
There are times, I must admit, that we all manage to get pretty grubby.
That thing over there... And Tim, what will we hear from you?
Well, we won't be talking about this.
You're a selfish, rude, arrogant...
On maynard.com.au. Hey, you!
And now, direct from the cafe at Australia's Science Channel, it's Brew Ha Ha. Science in less time than it takes to order a coffee. With Casey Harrigan.
Good call, ref. You were right to end the fight and award Floyd Mayweather a technical knockout on Conor McGregor. The decision has been really controversial, but we're sure which corner of the ring we're in for a predictable reason. Science. We look for evidence when we make our decisions, and there's a lot of it out there showing that boxing gloves are dangerous. Mayweather was raining hit upon hit upon hit on McGregor, landing the full force of his punches on the Irishman's skull. If the men hadn't been wearing gloves, they would have been more at risk of cracked jaws, lost teeth, and, crucially, broken fists. But their risk of brain damage and a total knockout would have dropped dramatically. Fingers and knuckles are going to give out long before a skull does. You just can't rain blows on someone before your hands give out. Bare knuckle boxing was a sport in the USA for 100 years, and there wasn't a single fatality. But these days, with gloves, there are 3 or 4 deaths a year, and about 3 out of every 20 professional fighters has permanent brain damage. We're in no rush to see these stats get bigger, and that's why the ref's call was the right call.
For more Brew Ha Ha and Australian science, visit www.australiascience.tv or visit Australia's Science Channel on Facebook. Well, I'm absolutely delighted to once again catch up with my old friend, comrade in arms with the science education, I guess you'd say, Professor, may I say, Paul Willis.
I'm glad you got that correct. I was just sitting here thinking, he's going to say doctor and I've got to say professor. But no, yes, it is professor. I am a professor.
What do you profess?
What do I profess? I am a professor, an adjunct associate professor of vertebrate palaeontology at Flinders University.
Now, listeners will well remember over the years, Paul, we've had discussions on the Skeptic Zone. You were, until very recently, the director of the Royal Institution in Adelaide. Now, these are the fine people who bring us, every week, Brew Ha Ha. But you've moved on.
Yeah, that's right, Richard. Look, I was director at the Royal Institution for 6 years, and that's a good innings for a director of anything.
It is.
To be honest, I had reached a point where I'd done more than I thought that I ever could for the institution. We'd set up Australia's Science Channel. And the future really required a different skill set, a different set of eyes to take the institution into the future. I recognised that. The council recognised that. And so it was an amicable and a positive thing.
That's happened.
It was
that's exactly. Fine. Yeah, things move on, things evolve, shall we say?
Well, the boot on the other foot. You look across corporate Australia, and it's littered with companies that are going down the gurgler because the management have long not recognised the limits of their own abilities, and I do not want to be measured in their ranks.
Right.
So. It was time to get out. It was time to move on. Look, the Australia Science Channel and the Royal Institution are going from strength to strength. Yeah. And, indeed, I'm going from strength to strength as well.
Well, it's because of you, of course. For many years on the Skeptic Zone, we were running A Week in Science, which was at heart, I guess it was a video presentation, but it certainly worked as audio, and I would use the audio from that to present on the Skeptic Zone, and more recently Brew Ha Ha, which was sort of sprang from A Week in Science, didn't it?
No, you're dead right there, Richard. There was a natural evolution from A Week in Science to Brew Ha Ha, and I'm actually proud of the fact that A Week in Science was my idea. It was something that I brought into the Royal Institution and said to the guys on the floor, look, this is something that we should be doing. And it evolved into Brew Ha Ha, which was actually the other direction. It was the guys on the ground saying, actually, we want to try and do this. And it was my privilege as the director to say, OK, have a crack at it. And,
well about a month ago, we interviewed Casey Harrigan on the Skeptic Zone, and she was explaining to us that it's they write it, and then they present it to the camera, and then it's uploaded. Yeah. And it's about a minute and a half of little science bites, isn't it?
Well, in this day and age, when so much is consumed online, a minute and a half is a good length of time.
It's not bad
to have anything. And when you look at the stats of what people are doing online, if you pull up the stats for any 1 month in social media, it's about 1/3 Facebook. It's about 1/3 all of the other social media platforms.
Wow.
The missing third is YouTube. And that's video only.
Yeah.
And so if you want to be effective in social media, you really ought to be in that video space. And most of those people who are interacting with YouTube and interacting with videos in that social media space, they're doing it on their phones. They're doing it incidental to everything else in their lives. They don't want to be nailed down for an hour watching a documentary. They don't want to be there for 20 minutes. That minute and a half, that's good. One message, get in there, get out. Yeah. That's the way it's going to work.
And it's not just one Brew Ha Ha every week, although on the Skeptic Zone we play one, but it can sometimes be 2 or 3 or 4. And that's why I encourage all our listeners to go to the channel itself, to go to Australia Science TV, where they can see much more than just Brew Ha Ha. And that, again, and giving credit to you, all that revolution at the Royal Institution came about under your directorship.
Yeah, Australia's Science Channel, it's a unique beast, and the best description that I've heard of it is it's the farmer's market for science communication. In that, you know, a researcher can put out their own videos about their research, much like a farmer can have a roadside stall and hope to capture passing traffic. But what you can also do is you can take your produce to a central market like Australia's Science Channel. And yes, your video will be there alongside loads of other researchers, but there is a much larger audience there to consume it.
Yeah.
And I think that the ideological Rubicon that we crossed with Australia's Science Channel is we took the communication of science directly from the researchers to the audience. If researchers can make their own story, they can post it up on Australia's Science Channel and tell the world about it. You know, all of my professional career as a science communicator, I've been at the ABC, I've been at the Royal Institution, particularly at the ABC. I was a journalist. Now, I don't want you to denigrate that particular profession, but in the overall flow of ideas, if anything, I got in the way. Because when a researcher told me their story, it became my story. And I had to tell that story in a particular way to appeal to a bigger audience, you know, to meet metrics that were imposed by the organisation, which meant that the story the researcher wanted to tell was no longer in play. And by being able to take the journalist out of that communication, being able to create this conduit where you could go straight from the researcher to the world, that I think is probably the biggest contribution I've made to science communication.
Well, it's happening. It's happening in such an incredible rate. But I guess, and before we move on to what you're doing now, there is that grey area where, yes, anybody, you know, even a fool like me, can pick up a phone and or an instrument and make a podcast, or the guy down the street or whatever. There's that interesting grey area. Well, that's good, but you have to make it palatable, presentable, entertaining for the audience somewhat.
You're dead right. There are people, researchers and otherwise, that should never be given an opportunity to stand in front of a camera or a microphone. And I think we all know who I'm talking about. You know, it's that guy in the lab down the corner. But then in this day and age, as you just pointed out, the technology is there, and the environment is there to allow people that want to try and tell their own story to the world to do it. All they need is a bit of training, and that's where my new life comes in.
This is interesting. Very excited to hear about this. I mean, you had wonderful success at the ABC when you were an on-air science presenter, and of course, many people remember you from that. And it goes without saying the wonderful things you did at the Royal Institution, but now you've moved on to a very interesting field.
Yeah, well, I've set up my own company. In setting up the Australia Science Channel, it's a wonderful model. Okay, we get researchers to tell us stories, and if they're universities or their institutions are members of the Royal Institution, then we can put it straight up through Australia's Science Channel to the world. Nice little conduit of information. If there was a weak link in the chain, it was that there's a lot of researchers out there who simply don't know how to tell their story, who've been exposed to social media training that terrifies them. You know, because they say things like, yes, you only have to spend 2 hours a week on LinkedIn. It's like, what researcher has got 2 hours of their life a week to devote to LinkedIn, let alone all the other stuff? There's been all of this around social media training, and there's been a whole load of understanding about how to use the modern technology. You've mastered it brilliantly. As this is a living example of what we're doing right now.
I guess so. Yeah.
You know, I mean, this when you consider that what we're doing now, with just your phone, with a rather silly purple sock over the end of it.
Yes.
You know, back in the day when I started on radio, to produce something similar took thousands of dollars worth of equipment,
of course,
and years of training.
Yes.
We can now do that.
Yeah.
Anybody who's got a mobile phone can actually do what we're doing at the moment. Anybody who's got a mobile phone and knows how to use it can produce a mini documentary. You go to Australia's Science Channel and you will see documentaries that I have produced, shot, and some of them completely edited, all on my mobile phone. And how do we teach those skills to those researchers who want to tell the world about their research? And it goes beyond that. It's not just the kind of ego-driven, I want to tell my story to the world, here I am, ladies and gentlemen. No, it's beyond that, because in this day and age, a measure of your outreach and your engagement as a researcher is a strong indicator that you're going to get your next grant.
Interesting. Really? Right.
Part of your grant funding proposal is 10% of ARC grants is based around outreach and engagement.
Wow.
So what we're talking about isn't marketing. It's not showmanship around your research. It's your professional development as a researcher to get out there and tell your story in the most effective ways. It's not difficult, and my business now is I can show you how to do it.
Wow, you're absolutely right. I mean, I don't know how this will sound, but I've been doing multimedia for many, many, many years, and the podcast now for nearly 10 years. So I don't give it a second thought, of course. Yeah. But for the scientist out there in her laboratory and think, I need to get this message out, and doesn't know how to do the video editing or the audio editing or to make this, and this is where you can help.
And it's not difficult, because if you can write a paper in a peer-reviewed journal, all you need to do is know how to put some adjectives back in there in the right places, and you've got a blog.
Yeah.
And if you've got a blog and you know how to read it into your phone, you've got a podcast. And if you have gone as far as a podcast, then you've got a story, and you can simply turn the video camera on your phone, and next thing you've got a video blog, All we have to do is show people how to do this, and then we will open that conduit of information.
And that's what you want to do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And please tell us more about your venture.
Well, what I actually wanted to also throw in is, and this will be of interest to a lot of your listeners, is I have recently been made an ambassador for the National Secular Lobby. Ooh. Now, this is a new group that has been raised largely in opposition to groups like the Australian Christian Lobby. In the Australian political landscape, there are a number of lobby groups that will put non-secular positions, will put religious positions out there.
Yeah.
And they're largely unchallenged. Who's out there saying this is actually a secular country?
Right.
These are the principles that we were founded on. We were not founded on a principle of freedom of religion. We were actually founded on a principle of freedom from religion, because you didn't want the Catholics interfering with the Anglicans, and you didn't want the Anglicans and the Catholics interfering with the Baptists, and so on and so forth. We had the principle enshrined in our society of a secular society, which is about freedom from religion, not freedom of religion.
Yeah.
And so to raise a voice to that, to say, I don't care what the hell you want to believe. At the moment, in Australian society, you can believe something as crazy as Scientology and still get a tax break for doing it.
Yeah.
That's not the principle that we want to address up front. I don't care what you want to believe, that's fine. But you do not have the right to inflict that belief system and the values from that belief system on anybody else. That's what a secular society is all about. Each to their own.
Right.
And so, I'm proud to be an ambassador for the National Secular Lobby, simply to get out there and put that message out there. I don't care what you believe. You must respect the right of everybody else to believe what they want to, or believe nothing at all if they don't wish to.
If you so wish to.
Yeah.
So you've got a couple of you've got a couple of what's the expression?
Irons in fires.
Irons in the fires at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how can people discover more about these irons in your fire?
Let's see. Google National Secular Lobby, and that will tell you more about that. And if you're interested in what I'm up to with media engagement, then mediaengagementservices.com.au. I know it's a mouthful, but if you think of the acronym, Media Engagement Services, mess. If anyone's going to be involved in a mess, it's going to be me. You never forget that.
Well, you haven't been involved in a mess so far, Professor Paul Willis. You've gone from success to success, and people, if you want to get some really seriously good advice about your professional engagement, especially in social networks with video and media and audio, quite possibly, then I can't recommend Professor Paul Willis highly enough. Paul, we've known each other for, I think
since last millennium.
Coming up to 20 years, old friend.
Yeah.
And it's really wonderful to catch up with you, and I trust we can see you back here in Sydney in the not-too-distant future.
And looking forward to it, and thanks for having a chat today.
It never ends. A friend starts talking about his new Reiki master, and someone else just posted about another all-natural cancer cure that they don't want you to know about. As skeptics, we dedicate a lot of time trying to protect those around us, but there's a way that you can reach millions. Guerrilla Skepticism on Wikipedia is a group that is working to keep the best skeptical information at everyone's fingertips in all languages. Join us. Training is self-paced and fun, and we have our very own super secret Facebook group. You will be educating the world in your sleep. To find out more, email us at gsowteam@gmail.com. Guerrilla Skepticism. The time is now.
Music by bensound.com.
It's the Raw Skeptic Report with Heidi Robertson.
Hello, and who am I here with today?
My name is Frank.
Hello, Frank, and where are you from?
From the north end of the Gold Coast, near Brisbane.
Okay, so you haven't had to come from too far away. And what's brought you here today?
Well, the event today, we saw the emails from Bintel about the Star Stuff convention, and it was very close to us and sounded like an interesting venue and place to visit.
And what's your background? Do you have a background in science per se, or just an interest in science?
I've got a technical background, but I've always been interested in science and astronomy, and I'm part of a group called Astro Anarchy. We just have star parties every month.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, tell us more about that. Astro Anarchy.
Astro Anarchy.
Okay. Astro Anarchy on the shirt.
Yeah, about 60 or 70 of us meet every month on the west side of Brisbane, the other side of Bow Desert. We set up our telescopes. We do astrophotography or visual observations and wide field and a bit of a mixture.
Oh, great.
Have different types of telescope setups. And
can people find you on Facebook or
Astro Anarchy? Look up Astro Anarchy on Facebook and just like our page. And it's not a club as such. It's just we just meet together and nothing fancy. If you like going out and having fun, and we'll show people how to set up equipment, and if they or have a look at see what equipment's around. And if they want to get into it.
That sounds great. And so you're open to having some more members like your page and perhaps join you?
Sure. I'm actually called... I've got a little Facebook page called Astrophotography by Frankie T, so I take some photos.
Okay.
So you might... if you find Astrophotography by Frankie T, you'll see some of my photos. Nothing great, but I try to improve as I go along.
Good on you, yeah. I can take a good selfie with my smartphone. That's about as far as I've got at the moment.
I can take better photos of deep space than my phone. For some reason, I take terrible shots with my phone, but I'm pretty good, taking photos of the sky at night.
Oh wow! So you must have really enjoyed the talk that we just had.
It was very good. Yes, he's a brilliant
Mark G.
Brilliant photography. It's more artwork. To me, it was just so. And I think the setup and the time to the setup and preparation for all these shots must be pretty intricate.
I was speaking with Dylan. There's Dylan. We're just talking about Mark G and his amazing astrophotography.
It's like artwork, I think.
It's so good, isn't it?
I was saying how when I first spoke with you, and you said almost the same thing that Mark said on the stage, when you got into it, you became a little bit obsessive.
It's a little bit addictive. I mean, you're looking at the almost infinite view of the observable universe. It's how's that, not addicting?
It makes you feel very small and very insignificant, but also pretty good at the same time, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It's quite liberating, really.
You're busy. Get on with your stuff. We'll see you inside in a minute. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you too.
Thank you for joining us on the Skeptic Zone. And if you want to find out more about Astro Anarchy, just go to Facebook and they can welcome you into their group there.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hi, this is Ben Radford.
And this is Pasquale Romero from the Squaring the Strange podcast.
Every week, my co-host and I cast a skeptical eye at a different topic.
Monsters, ghosts, demons, mysteries, and even current events are dissected and discussed with a fun, unscripted, and skeptical take that you're sure to enjoy.
Find us at squaringthestrange.com, iTunes, or on your favorite podcast platform.
Here is an update to a story we brought you last week about the rogue, or he's been labelled rogue in the media, rogue Dr. John Piesse, who, as you will recall last week, was recorded on video at a vaxxed screening, saying, or almost boasting, how he helped parents dodge immunization for their children. This update comes to us, amongst other sources, from the Herald Sun, heraldsun.com.au, links in the show notes, written by Grant MacArthur and Lucy Vanderberg, published on August 31. Rogue Mitcham doctor John Piesse to stop treating patients. Hundreds of children with immunization exemptions may be booted from kindergartens and childcare or forced to have the shots if those exemptions are found to be invalid or to have been granted by a suspect doctor. State and federal health authorities are reviewing the validity of vaccination exemptions overseen by a group of Melbourne general practitioners allegedly involved in an anti-vaccination cell. The Herald Sun has confirmed Victoria's Department of Health and Department of Education is investigating exemptions granted by controversial Mitcham GP, Dr. John Piesse, who on Thursday agreed to stop treating patients. On Thursday, Dr. Piesse entered into a legally binding agreement not to practice. Dr. Piesse's undertaking is an interim measure while investigations continue. If he breaches the undertaking, he will be subject to regulatory action. And that update comes to us from the Herald Sun by Grant MacArthur and Lucy Vanderberg. Now we bring you a story that was only brought to my attention by our reporter, the Raw Skeptic, Heidi Robertson. And I quote from the website of the Sydney Morning Herald, www.smh.com.au, written by Stephanie Peatling, published on August 31. World's #1 anti-vaxxer, Ken Heckenlively, denied entry to Australia. The self-proclaimed, quote, world's #1 anti-vaxxer, end quote, has been denied permission to visit Australia. Immigration Minister Peter Dutton said on Thursday Kent Heckenlively would not be able to tour Australia later this year as part of an international campaign calling for a pause in childhood vaccinations. Quote, we're not going to allow him to come here, end quote, Mr. Dutton told Sydney radio station 2GB. Quote, these people who are telling parents that their kids shouldn't be vaccinated are dangerous. We have been very careful in having a look right through this particular case, and it's clear to me that it's not in our national interest that he should come here," end quote. Mr. Heckenlively, who lives in Northern California, contributes to a website that claims autism is, quote, "an environmentally induced illness that is treatable and that children can recover," end quote. He also has links to Andrew Wakefield, the disgraced former doctor whose debunked study was central to the anti-vaccination movement and has since gone on to make the film Vaxxed. The film has been banned by several film festivals, but has been shown in secret locations around Australia. And as an aside, of course, Skeptic Zone fans will be familiar with this ongoing story and its ramifications over the last month or so. We read on, "Immigration officials recently banned British campaigner Polly Tommy and US campaigner Susan Humphreys from entering the country for 3 years after the pair toured Australia with Vaxxed, which alleges there is a link between measles, mumps and rubella, vaccine and autism. The opposition," that is the opposition party here in Australia in the federal sphere, "the opposition had written to Mr. Dutton requesting Mr. Heckenlively's application for a visa be denied." As another aside, it looks like the government and the opposition parties are of one voice on this issue. We read on, quote, "Dangerous misinformation peddled by anti-vaccination proponents should never take the place of proven scientific advice, and we have a responsibility to make sure parents are getting the right message," end quote. The opposition's health spokeswoman Catherine King said on Thursday, quote, "The fight against vaccination misinformation is continuous. Earlier this month, we saw 2 anti-vaccination advocates tour the country and show a film that wrongly claims a link between measles, mumps and rubella, vaccine and autism. While our immunisation program has historically been effective, there is growing evidence that anti-vaccination advocates and their political allies like Pauline Hanson and the One Nation Party are now undermining our success, as shown by the doubling of measles cases between 2013 and 2014, end quote. And I notice this story is making news around the world, and I'm just scanning now the BBC.com. Kent Heckenlively, US anti-vaxxer denied Australian visa, reads the headline, which covers more or less the same story the Herald reported. As ever, we shall keep you updated as to further developments with this story. Tickets are now available for Skepticon, the Australian Skeptics' 33rd National Convention. This will be held on the 18th and 19th of November in Sydney, Australia. Speakers include former naturopath Britt Hermes, Jason Silver, award-winning journalist Kathy Marks, Captain Disillusion, Dr. Viren Sharma, Lawrence Lung, Dr. Brad Mackay, Sonia Pemberton, Dr. Carl Kruzelniski and Adam Spencer, and special guest, Cara Santa Maria. For more information and to buy your tickets, head to www.thinkinc.org.au or www.skeptics.com.au. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone this week, and thank you once again to all those wonderful people who support the Skeptic Zone with PayPal or Patreon, and keep the show going. There's no support, there'd be no show, and I really am grateful, and the reporters are grateful for your continuing support for the Skeptic Zone, now in its 9th year. Next year we'll be celebrating 10 years. And it just occurred to me, but right now, as I'm recording this, Dragon Con in Atlanta, Georgia is underway, and I'm looking at all the posts coming through about that. All my friends are there, or many of my friends, of course. Very jealous. Wish I was there because it was Dragon Con in Atlanta in 2008, that the Skeptic Zone was launched all those years ago. And maybe it would be appropriate to be there for the 10-year anniversary. I'll see. It's not always easy, as you can appreciate, to just go over to these places, especially from Sydney, Australia. That's quite a long way. But you know what? It's a year away, so we'll see. A big thank you to the students and staff of Endeavour Sports High School here in Sydney. Maynard and I were there, a couple of days ago to perform the Mystery Investigators for their Year 9s. And what a high-spirited group they were. Lots of participation in the show and lots of excitement. Thank you again, and we had a great time. And I noticed that the Stranger Things Down Under group here in Sydney will be off to the Oz Paranormal and Spiritual Expo on the 9th of September. It's just a week away. If you go to Facebook and look for Stranger Things Down Under, you'll see details of that group. I think I'll be going along there to do some reporting for the Skeptic Zone. I'll see who would like to come too. And just before I go, I thought I'd play you a very short clip from my recent radio segment with Mike Williams, who does the Midnight to Dawn slot on the weekends on the Macquarie Network all over Australia. And my skeptical segment, which I share with Tim Mendham from the Australian Skeptics, comes up about 5:45 in the morning. So all those early risers on a Sunday get to listen to 15 minutes of skepticism every week. But it's archived. It's always archived if you go to, for example, 2gb.com and search for Saunders or Skeptics or something like that. You'll find previous episodes, or there's a link on the show notes. But the one that went out just this morning, in fact, was all about the lost continent, the lost island of Atlantis. And I thought I'd play you a brief clip of what I had to say.
Crystals. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you something, a quote from a website. Yep. I have not made this up. Okay. This is not something I've conjured up to make the New Age people look a bit silly. This is their actual words. Here we go.
Okay.
Atelian crystals from Atlantis, received power from various sources, including the sun, the Earth's energy field, grid system, or from each other. Grid points are often marked by pyramids. Aha, there you go. The Atlanteans used this energy combined with crystals to transmit energy from one pyramid to another, or as aliens to enter and leave the planet, depending on the tilt of the Earth's axis at that particular time of the year. Right. One pyramid could function to intensify and transmit energies to other pyramids, which would then act to receive and disperse energy as needed. The opposite would apply when the pyramid was at an unfocused point to their celestial alignment, when other pyramids would be used as transmitters. This was an intricate matrix crystal grid system.
That takes everything in, doesn't it? Everything we talked about in the last 6 months, it takes every one of those things in. Aliens, crystals, pyramids.
Yeah. Well, this is the wonderful thing about something like Atlantis. People can basically, and I'll say it, they can just make up anything they like and say this really happened there, because you can't verify it. You can't go to Atlantis and say, well, we'll look at the ancient records of Atlantis and see if this is true or not. So people can say they
That's a lot of fun being on the radio every week with Mike Williams, and we've been doing that now since February, March. Quite a long time, covering many, many topics, and I hope we continue for many weeks to come. And just before I go, if you happen to be in Sydney, in the Sydney city, today, the 3rd of September, Maynard is doing a DJ gig at Harpoon Harry's, which is a hotel near Central Station. I think he starts around 4 o'clock. If you want to see Maynard in action as a DJ spinning the discs, that's the place to be. But for now, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for contacts, an archive of all episodes since 2008, and our online store. Please support the Skeptic Zone by following us on Twitter @Skeptic Zone, liking us on Facebook, and leaving a review on iTunes. You can also show your support by subscribing via PayPal for as little as 99 cents a week. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics Inc. or any other skeptical organisation.